Hey, everybody, and welcome to this episode of The Blind Ambition with Jack Kelly. It's your friend Rick from Blind, and today I'm going to introduce you to Katya Laviolette. She's the Chief People Officer at 1Password, where she doubled the fully remote workforce to nearly 900 employees in 2022 across 5 countries, and she's hit a record 83% offer to acceptance rate. Before joining 1Password, Katya was an HR executive at Essence, TC Transcontinental, CBC Radio Canada, Rio Tinto, Bombardier Aerospace, and CN Railway. She's also a board director with Sanamax and Labs, two global organizations focused on the circular economy. For those of you that don't know, 1Password's human-centric security keeps people safe at work and at home. The company's award-winning security platform is reshaping the future of authentication, including passwordless features. 1Password is trusted by over 100,000 businesses such as IBM, Slack, Snowflake, Shopify, and Under Armour, and protects the most sensitive information of millions of individuals and families across the globe. Thanks for coming on the show, Katya.
It's great to be here, Jack and Rick. Thank you for having me.
So I want to kind of dig into your career because your bio that I just shared with everyone is kind of a who's who of the most influential leading companies in Canada and abroad. So can you walk us through your career?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. It's kind of I think I have a relatively unique career. It's kind of pieces of a puzzle put together. I started actually in the trenches. I say I've done planes and trains. I yet to do automobiles, but I started really in labor relations, in collective bargaining. I was 24 years old, negotiating with the Canadian auto workers at the time, and really kind of cut my teeth in the HR field. And I progressively moved into different functions in HR and worked for most of my career in really large scale multinational companies. But a lot of the thread of those companies was very entrepreneur and family led. And so I've been in businesses like railroading, as well as transportation, aerospace, packaging, media, our public broadcaster in Canada that is very well known by most of us Canadians. And for the most part, the bulk of my career has been as an HR generalist, but I've been able to have the privilege of touching pretty well every function within HR, just from an experience standpoint. And about, I'd say, 8 years ago now, I decided that it was time kind of to move off and move away from kind of the publicly traded world into, I wanted to work more with entrepreneurs in private companies, which is a bit of a different shift. And I decided that I would actually head into retail. And that's when I joined Essence, which is kind of like I call it the Amazon of luxury e-commerce. And then once I had finished with Essence in terms of that mandate of scaling the company, I moved into 1Password, which I call kind of like my pure tech mandate of chief people officer to scale a company. So my experience is pretty broad. You usually find HR professionals who are mainly in kind of certain areas or certain industries, but I pretty well can play in multiple industries and have had the privilege of doing so, and have seen, a lot of things, and a lot of great things, a lot of challenging things. And I hope that with 1Password, I can bring all that to the table to help them scale.
Speaking of challenging things, Katya, how did you navigate from like 220 till now, which it was just craziness, right? From the pandemic, the Great Resignation. Now it's looking hard. It almost seems like a white collar recession. Like 230,000 people in the tech sector this year will let go. I mean, how do you stay sane, first of all, and all that? How do you hire all those people? And how did you manage it in the last few years? Because it had to be really wild and chaotic.
Yeah, it's been pretty chaotic. I actually, when I said that I wanted to kind of make a change in my career and move into more entrepreneurial, privately held companies, smaller, like get in the trenches and really help build. I really like to operate, and I think that my years of experience in different industries and different kind of functions has helped that. And so I have been in situations like I have like a few battle scars, a lot of crisis management situations, and I think that that has been super essential in helping in the kind of just the pandemic related phases. And I say to a lot of people that, you know, the Katya Laviolette of 2023 is not the same person you would see in 2016. Like, you know, back then it would be like, okay, let's build this program. Let's look at a few best practices. Let's build it, put it in place. It's done, check the box, move on. And you just don't do that anymore. Everything changes, everything pivots. You have to listen. You have to have humility to be able to say, oh, maybe that wasn't the right decision, and let's move and do something different. And so there's a lot going on that is actually crossing over with people and professional. And so you have to, what I do to keep myself sane is you actually have to create almost a boundary of like, I'm going to come to work. It's really important that I empathize and listen to people and so forth, but I have to keep myself kind of mentally healthy as well. So I picked up running along the way. Most people know that. It's kept me sane. It keeps me very focused. It's a great way for me to disconnect. And I just bring like everything, you know, I do on a daily basis. If we have something that's kind of in front of me that I've not seen before, I usually kind of dig down deep and say, oh, I actually have seen something similar to that. Let's try it. Let's pivot. Let's adjust. Let's use our network, see who's out there, who's going to help us and help me and help me be a good sounding board to get some solutions together and so forth. But the world is very, very different. It's HR is a lonely job. It's a high stress job. You have to be passionate about wanting to make a change, wanting to help people. And, you know, you have to, that's what motivates me. And if you're not really in that space and it drains you, you shouldn't be in this career.
So Katya, how do you, from 2016 till now, I've seen a big difference in terms of, let's say, how employees now are the ones who are advocating and saying, hey, I want to hear the corporate leadership talk about these social issues, whether it's George Floyd, whether it's about the abortion, you know, ruling that came out fairly recently and so forth. And that didn't happen as much in the past. Now it seems like very fast paced that if something comes up, you know, you need to jump in there and say, all right, what do I do? Because now you can have a whole bunch of people who are angry saying, Katya, you're not doing anything and you're not saying anything about this. Is that one of the things that you've seen like a big shift taking place?
It's massive. It's massive. Yeah. It was easy to, you know, several years ago to say, oh, no, these things don't come into the workplace.
Right.
It's very, very easy to separate. And I think the pandemic accelerated this kind of convergence of societal issues and then work issues, and everything is blended, and it's not going back to how it was. That is for sure. So that's a given. So once you accept that, because you can't wait it out, you have to accept that that's what's happening. Then you have to figure out, well, how do you maneuver in that world within the business that you work in and within the culture that you work in. And so, for example, at 1Password, very, very inclusive, very open business. We have a very robust diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging working committee, strategy, and so forth. We're very proud of that. And, you know, we do let people express their opinions, which are varied and wide and culturally different. Can we address everyone's issues? Absolutely not. Can we listen? Yeah, for sure we can. Mm-hmm. And so this is something that as an HR professional, like you can't, I have seen some individuals who are like, oh, this will just go away. It's not going to go away. So let's build it in. Let's make sure we address it, that we do things that are done from a business perspective as well. and that we listen and we pivot accordingly. Like we're constantly brought in with societal issues that, we have to figure out how does that work in the workplace and how does it not work in the workplace, and be very direct about it.
How do you balance that if you have people who are, let's say, very on the left or very on the right or what have you, and they think they're right and this group thinks they're right, and does it get kind of messy at times and you have to be the referee to make sure?
Roe versus Wade was another, like George Floyd, another very monumental decision. Obviously coming out of the US. What we're seeing with what's going on in the red states is also a very obviously difficult situation. We have a lot of our bits, as we call them, our employees in the US as well. But there are issues that we will take a stance on, and we are taking a stance on issues such as those. Do we please everyone in our workforce? No. Are we aware of it? Yes. Do we allow people to express their views? Yes. Roe versus Wade, good example. We took a very, very strong position on it. We got obviously a lot of support externally and internally, but there were some employees who were not happy about it. And the best way is to listen to them. And so I obviously got on the Zoom, because that's the way it was working at the time, and have to listen to different people's perspectives, take everything in, consult, understand what's happening on the market, what we can do that makes sense for our remote work, and make a decision. And some people are going to like it and some people are not. But at the end of the day, the best thing is to make a decision.
You mentioned your experience, before you kind of ascended to the C-suite, so to speak, has been in labor relations, like working with these unions, focusing on being an HR generalist. Is that the typical kind of career pathway for a C-suite executive? For those that are like looking to crack into the C-suite themselves because they are an HR professional, or folks that are looking for pattern matching to see, oh, well, I'm an engineer, but maybe there's kind of these steps that I need to kind of demonstrate or accomplish before I can even be considered. Do you have any advice there?
I think there's all sorts of ways to kind of move into, if you're talking about an HR executive moving into a C-suite position, there's a ton of different avenues to get there. That's what the beauty of the profession is about. You can work in different industries, you can work in different sub-functions and so forth. What I always say to individuals that I mentor or support is that if you want to be a C-level chief people officer, CHRO, and you want to be really at the kind of forefront, I really believe you need to go deep, and you need to not just have experience in recruitment or not just have experience in organizational development. Like, I think having really deep experience in those sub-functions allows you to be a really true HR generalist and like get into the detail, understand it. I have a great team. I've had great teams throughout my career. I surround myself with very good specialists, but I'm able to ask the questions to learn, because at the end of the day, it's me going to the board or to the comp committee. I will take a specialist with me when I'm really like, it's a really technical issue, but I should be able to master that content quite well at that level. And so a generalist, I think, it's a great job, but I encourage people that I do either lead or that I do mentor is, please go into the weeds, like get into the detail, like turn up your sleeves and get to know the sub-functions, because it makes you a better complete HR professional. And underpinning all that that's all sorts of HR mumbo jumbo, but underpinning all that is like, even before you do that, understand the business that you're in, because you can be an HR professional in pretty well every industry, but it applies itself differently in a scaling business or a business that's realigning or that you're divesting of and so forth. So understand the business model at function, which is really important.
Walk us through what an HR or a people team looks like, because for a lot of our audience, they have these like stereotypes about HR. or some of them are even negative, right? That they're just, the famous one is, oh, well, they're just protecting the company. And so they're looking to minimize risk and minimize lawsuits. And so they're not really helping you. They're just trying to move you along, or they're trying to build these processes so that they can defend themselves later or kind of cover someone else's butt. Like, where are all the disciplines and kind of what's the like mission mandate for an HR or people team?
Yeah, I think it's kind of one of the functions that gets probably the most heat, which is unfortunate. So I think it's our job as HR professionals to kind of rectify that and like actually educate people on what do we do on a daily basis. So, if someone's coming out of school and they're like, well, I want to pursue an HR career, like, what's all that about? And I'm like, well, you got to figure out how to identify good talent, how to develop talent, how to train people, how to negotiate collective agreements, how to figure out how to protect people from health and safety risks, how to pay people well, how to design good benefit plans. Like, the list goes on and on and on. And it's not just the typical, the one thing that gets me riled the most is when someone has said to me, and it's happened, it doesn't happen very much anymore, but people will say, oh, you work in HR, you must be a nice person. I'm like, well, I guess I'm nice, but I don't really care if you talk to me about being nice. I have to be competent in what I do, and I have to understand, like, what is good HR to drive the business. That's what's most important. So it's our job as HR professionals to demystify. So there's a lot behind it. And yeah, at the end of the day, you actually have to balance representing the employee and representing the company and managing that risk and taking the right decision holistically, which isn't always easy. You're not always going to be put in a great space. So one thing that I was talking to my team about a lot is the whole concept of conflict, and was talking about my career trajectory. And someone said to me, oh, you understand like where you come from, like you come from the trenches of like deep labor relations, like the only woman at the table at the time being a young woman dealing in a very male dominated environment. And it's actually weaved its way through my career, because conflict for me isn't a negative. It's like, let's get the issues on the table and deal with it directly. And actually, it's a very important, for me, and I think for others, it's a very important component to have as an HR professional, because you deal with conflict on a daily basis. So you better be comfortable with it.
Is that kind of the challenge that Rick brought up? Because you have these conflicts and these challenges, it all comes to your doorstep. So it's easy to be the bad person, right? The bad woman, the bad guy, that you're the roadblock why the person did get the job. Is that kind of like what Rick you're alluding to, where it creates that feeling? And I wonder if it's something, Katya, that it has to be more branding to explain to not just you personally, but the whole HR business, to say, wait, no, here's what we really do. Here's what's really going on. Because I think a lot of people aren't sure, like what whose side are they on? Are they on my side, not my side? What are they doing? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And it's, hey, at the end of the day,
Yeah.
like, my job is, if we're hiring someone and I don't, let's just take a simple case of hiring someone, putting them through a selection process, and I don't think we should hire them. Well, I should say why in a very objective manner and state my case and influence that. And at the end of the day, if we don't hire them, maybe I've influenced that and I'm the bad person, but I'm very comfortable with my decision because it's been made in the right lens. So sure, we could be branded like that, but then we could be branded as really facilitating and putting in place like wonderful benefits that are going to, really help our employees and so forth. So in the profession, coming back to it, you have to juggle back and forth with tough days of like making those tough decisions. You can't be nice all the time. Like, it's not about that. It's about making the right, fair decision. That's what's most important.
In speaking with letting a candidate know, how did we go, let's say from 2016 again to now, where you didn't hear ghosting, you didn't hear any of that, but now, how did that just become an acceptable thing where, like, I run a search firm, and that has to be the biggest complaint for people, where they'll say, hey, I've interviewed 5, 6, 7, 8 different people over 6 months, and then boom, ghosted, never hear back. That's it.
I
Like,
think
how
there's a
does
few- well, it's so several years ago, like
Yeah.
let's go back to 16, 17, 18, 19, even into maybe just, no, like let's say to 19. Not like, yeah, there's an issue with
Mhm.
talent, but it wasn't at the peak like it was, say, in 2021, and then it kind of drops off in 22. And especially if you come in and you laser focus in on tech and all the scaling that has been done in the industry. So these terms of ghosting and like just the great resignation and things like that, that's all actually accelerated through the entire kind of economics are at play, the markets are at play. And so fascinating. I began with 1Password 18 months ago. We were 500 bits. We just passed the 1,000 mark in
No,
August.
Bits is a person. Is that way? Bits is
Yes,
okay.
it's our employees, and we passed the 1,000 employee mark in August, and we'll probably be around 1,100 in January, probably around the range of 1,500 next year. So we're growing very, very quickly. And since the downturn, I would call it, in tech, and say earlier this year, it's almost like there was a lagging effect, and like it's almost like everyone who was being laid off, like it was still very, very, it's still quite competitive, but we're just inundated with talent now, in the sense of we have 120,000 resumes that have come in over the last 10 months.
Wow.
We had for
wait. How many came in?
120,000 resumes in the last 10 months. For our new interns, we hire, I might not have the number accurate, it's either 20 or 30 interns, but we had something like 20,000 plus resumes just for the interns. So it's like the market has shifted. We now have a talent pool. But at the end of the day, I have a great team of talent acquisition. It's really important to have a great experience hiring people in, but also letting people know that you're not going to qualify. And so we also have to ensure that everyone has that same experience throughout, which we've been working very, very hard to ensure, because we can't speak to every 120,000 applicants, but we can make sure that everyone gets a response. And so that's a bit of the opposite from the ghosting piece.
Yeah.
The market is like, it's moving quickly. It's positive for us right now, but we shouldn't underestimate that it'll ramp back up, and we'll be in a different situation.
So what you're saying in part, that in a way, for some, it's not so great for some job seekers because they may be in between roles, but as an employer, you have more choices to pick
Now
from.
we do.
Yeah.
Now we do. And let's face it, we're very privileged. We work in a great industry. We are in the cybersecurity industry. I say that there are a couple of industries that are very hot. I call that the electrification of vehicles and cybersecurity. And, people want to work in a mission-driven company. We work in the security space. We want to make people's lives safer, and we have a lot of people who want to join us. We're also kind of at that nice mark of 1,000 plus, where you're coming in and it's not super small, but it's not huge as well. So there's a lot of opportunity for development.
I think that's really interesting, because I had never considered that perspective, right? Because I think with all of the layoffs, that's exactly right. There's a lot more professionals out there, and some of them have like brand name marquee names on their resumes, right? So
Yes.
there's a wealth of choices for an employer or hiring manager.
Yes, and we will soon become a marquee name.
If you're not there already in Canada,
Yes.
I suspect, right?
Yes, we are. Yes, I would say in North America for sure. In the security space, we would be a marquee name, and obviously in our employer branding, we've really come on the map in the last 12 to 18 months. And we hire a lot of, we have a lot of individuals from Meta, Amazon, Google, Shopify. So we attract very, very top talent.
I was just going to ask that because Rick and I, we had a podcast about kind of what job do I take? A prestige kind of company or a place that's getting more money, kind of going through that debate. But it's interesting. So you're getting people from Amazon and Meta and all those kind of big name FANG kind of places, which
Yes.
is great. That sounds great. I mean, so in a way, also it's good for those people in between roles to feel that there are places to go to as well. So even if they're in between, there's options. There's places that are hiring.
And there's options in the sense of it's very, some people, it's a bit like me. Like I was in very large companies, 80,000 plus, down to 15,000 would have been kind of where I would play for the majority of my career. And then since Essence and 1Password, these are 1,000 to 1,500 employee companies. This was like a division for me in the past. And so what I find ultimately fun in the latter part of my career is you can roll up your sleeves, you can build things, you can iterate, you can implement on the fly. And you actually get, from an HR standpoint, the pulse of the employees is really, it's rich because you're on the ground, you're closer to what's happening, and you can affect change. So it's always like two things drive me, is fun and impact. And, those are things that I really want to have in a job that I'm passionate about. If I don't have those things, it's not a lot of fun.
I think that's so interesting because I think the community on Blind, there's so many ambitious people. They're looking for kind of the next way to level up their career. For some folks, it's very easy to focus on like, what's the fastest way that I could get that next job title? Can I get it? Can I get that promotion by applying to another job and getting it there at another company? Can I, maximize my compensation? What's the, hottest stock that's going to drive my stock-based comp up? But I had never thought about the stage of a company in terms of their company size before. And that employee headcount figure can actually be a clue into how that team or how that company is structured internally. In terms of, wow, like there's enough for that impact where they've reached a certain number of level of scale, obviously, because they have the headcount and the kind of resources distributed to support that growth. But alternatively, you know, the certain kind of industries that you're choosing in your career to have kind of move between in terms of, well, my sweet spot is 10,000 to 15,000. Do you have any other kind of like tips or kind of ways to gauge a certain company or a certain opportunity that might not be intuitive for our users or our audience?
Yeah, that's a great question, Rick. I think you need to, maybe I'll use my example of when I decided, okay, I'm going to leave kind of the big publicly traded world. What was important to me? It was important. I wanted to work in an entrepreneurial environment because even in my publicly traded life, these were companies that were built by founder-led entrepreneurs, and then they became very big, although they still had majority shareholder ownership. And so that piece, working with entrepreneurs who have built businesses from ground up, was really important. Going to a company that actually made a profit from an EBITDA standpoint, had a margin, wasn't burning cash, had good balance sheet, had a good line of business, their product wasn't going to be commoditized. Super important. Looking at the talent, who are you going to work with? Like, who are your colleagues going to be? Are you going to enjoy going to work with them? Because when you go into a smaller company, it's I don't know what the word is, but it's a slug. Like you go through it, like it's hard. It's not easy coming into something that you're building, and it's intense. And so the talent is very important. And then just making sure that there's enough scale. So what I was looking for when I came out of those larger company was probably around like at least I'd say getting into 1,000 employee mark and having a decent team with a number of employees, because I like to lead. That would be important, and then seeing the growth trajectory. So those are kind of like areas that were really important. And then making sure, this is an interesting one, is I wanted to join a company, especially part of my decision for 1Password was I wanted to be somewhere where the founders had really had it, like they bootstrapped it, like they had come from like pretty well nothing, like they understand nothing is not a negative, but they bootstrapped the company from the ground up. And so they understand what it means to build, and it wasn't given to them. And that's like my perspective of being hungry. And there's a lot of literature that's, or things that have been written about hiring hungry candidates. And in a scale up, you want people who are hungry to deliver and who want to come on board and help you deliver on your mission. And so that was another element that's like, for me, it was super critical. And so there's a lot of like glamour about different names and so forth, but I think you really have to look deep down into what does the company offer, who's their talent, what's their business model. All that is important. And you need to be able to say, when you're sitting with your friends having dinner, this is the company I work for and this is what I do. And then you're really proud about it. That's a good litmus test, actually, for if you think you want to be engaged by, like if you've selected a company and are you engaged by it, it's actually a really good test to do, is to say, sit down with your friends and say, hey, I'm going to take this job at this company and this is why. And if you have like a really great level of energy and positive attitude about it, then that's a good sign.
In addition to being hungry, when you look at candidates, are there certain things that you kind of keep your eye out for? And then also are there things that you kind of be leery of? If someone comes in, let's say I'm from fill in the blank name, big shot tech company, and they come in arrogant, you're like, I don't know if this is going to be the right person. Are there certain things that people who are interviewing should just have their antenna up and know this works and this doesn't work?
Yes, absolutely. So humility is really critical for me, no matter what stage I've ever been in my career. Like I say to every person I interview coming into 1Password, do not come in and say, I've done this at this company, this is what we'll do. Come in and spend 30 days listening. Understand the culture, understand where this company has come from, where it wants to be, how things happen here. Look into the subculture, look at the behaviors, and then start thinking about where do you want to go. But if you come in and you're just like, whatever, I've done this before, you're gonna look behind you like in 60 days and no one's gonna be following you.
All right, hey,
So,
Rick, is this, I'm saying this with love, does this mean trouble for the blind people? Because they don't lack you, maybe they lack a little humility. What do you think? I mean, do they need to brush up on their interviewing?
I think it's a challenge, right? Because I think, especially at the like mid-level, senior level, level where a lot of our professionals in our community are, they're often getting hired for specific reasons, right? Like a company might be looking for domain experience, right? So it's an insurance technology company and they want insurance experts to be able to just dive right in and say like, hey, like this is just how the industry works and these are the kind of standard norms. Then there are folks where they're looking for like companies that are like looking for specific kind of like leadership skills, right? Where you're going to come in and build out your entire team because that discipline or that job function doesn't yet exist. And then others, there's just companies where they're just looking for super individual contributors, maybe with a senior title. And I think for the blind community, they often have difficulties putting themselves in that employer perspective or that hiring manager perspective and like taking a second to think, well, there's this company that has this job rack out there. What are they looking for, right? What stage of company? And like, where do I slot in? Because, there's certain roles where you could have that domain experience and they actually just want you, they don't care that you went to Google, right? Or that Google did it this way. They want you to build something out or mentor a team of folks and that might even be the executives of how this function typically looks. What are the best practices there? And so like taking that extra step, kind of taking Katya's advice and saying like, actually like put myself in that shoes and really study what that interview, what that hiring manager, what that executive, what that company, what that industry is looking for.
Yeah, and preparation, like the market shifted, like there's a lot of talent on the market. So I think, 12 months ago, it was like maybe we had two people for a role, and you have to adjust accordingly. But we're, knock on wood, we're privileged to say we don't have that situation. We have a panoply of talent to be able to select from, which is phenomenal right now.
Now you have like 200 per role or more, right? Or
Yeah, absolutely.
20,000.
Yeah,
Oh,
absolutely.
wow.
And I think they all, when you get the resumes, because like if I post sometimes on LinkedIn, I'll get 1,000 resumes, but they're very few who are really good. But so when you're getting these resumes, I'm presuming they're really good. So you're not just getting, quantity, but you're getting quality, right?
A year ago, we would get a lot that would not, and now we have much more rigor in the
Wow.
entire process, that we are getting much more quality. And we're also doing some sourcing. We also have a whole initiative on diversity as well. So I'd said when we started, to the individual who leads our TA function, I said, I want us to build like a recruitment machine. Like I want it to be best in class. And like we have a people analytics engineer with us. Like it's
Wow.
like someone can come to me, just a great example. One of our executive came to me the other day and says, it's like taking this long to fill. I'm like, I don't think our time to fill is that. We actually have time to fill by different level, different function, and so forth. So data speaks and it can inform. So we have a lot of anecdotes, but let's look at the data to make sure it's factual.
Can you give us more insights, like while we have you, about kind of behind the scenes look into the job interview process at 1Password? What should a candidate that's looking to apply, how do these stand out? What should they expect as they're moving step by step, stage by stage?
Well, with what we're wanting to accomplish, I mean, you talked about it in the intro in terms of passwordless and authentication, and really offering a complete suite of tools for, we call it, securing someone's life, is we are looking for deep experience in the security domain. And so that is going to be very, very important in our 2024 kind of product and tech hires. And so this is critical in some of the domains of skills that we want to build. It's interesting, like we're pretty open. Someone was asking me the other day, like, our customer experience reps, do you require a degree? No, we want people who love the customer, who can demonstrate that they like live and breathe the customer. And if they can do that, they don't need a degree for that. And so we're quite open in terms of like the different qualifications we need across the board. Once someone comes in, we actually have, our talent acquisition team has intake meeting with internal clients. They set out the whole kind of roster of interviews based on the level and so forth. You'll have like your typical manager interview, your typical screen, your typical manager interview, your colleague interview. Depending on the level, you might have a case to do or a panel to do, and so forth. And we're trying now, not trying, we are integrating our values: lead with honesty, keep it simple, put people first, throughout the interview process, because culturally we want to make sure that people are aligned to our values of what we're expecting at 1Password. So there's a lot of depth that goes in there, but you don't just come in and have one interview and are hired. There's a lot of process behind it.
I'm very interested in kind of the impact or the focus on the values, right? Because I know, especially among our audience, you know, Amazon famously does this where they'll ask you for scenarios to kind of slot in how you embody or live out, or how your experience has kind of showcased a certain value. Do you do something similar where it's that rigid, or should it just come across more naturally in terms of someone speaking to their own background?
We have like prompting questions for managers to help them. And so we're like we provide a lot of tools. We have a hiring manager cannot hire without going through diversity training or hiring manager training. So it's a requirement here. We want a high quality process. So we will divvy up the questions across the different interview process or the different incumbents within there. And then people will stick to that, but then they'll go off, obviously, depending on their level of experience, to try and dig a bit deeper on certain pieces. So it's a bit of a, I'd say it's a bit of a, probably a hybrid, a bit of a blend.
You kind of go one step further and share any like commonly made mistakes or objections that you hear are being raised in interview debriefs by hiring managers, recruiters, or executives at 1Password?
I would say things like just not being prepared. Like, maybe we're biased, but it'd be great if you understand the product, if you've tested it out, if you've gone online and got the free 15-day trial and you understand it, it would be nice.
So
That's
the way you say that, I guess a lot of people don't do their homework.
Oh, no.
No, a lot of people, a lot of people know the product,
yeah,
but it's like
they don't test it out or check it out.
But when you show a level of curiosity and you show a level of interest, it's very helpful. So I'm giving a clue. I'm giving you a clue. That would be important. And then really collaborating, like we test to make sure that people can collaborate cross-functionally in a very high, fast-paced, high growth environment as well. Not working in silos, understanding how to work remotely. We are a fully remote company. We have been so for 18 years. We are not a pandemic remote company. We have a collaboration space that we have in Toronto where we set up for meetings for people to come together. But you have to be ready to work remotely, which it's not easy for everyone.
Gosh, is there anything else people should know before they apply to 1Password, or what folks should know about your company generally in terms of its employer brand?
We're just a great, I would say that we are, for those in the industry who know us, we're, I would say the marquee. For those who don't know us, you should come and explore, because it's like a diamond in the rough, or like a unicorn. Like people are like, wow, once you come in and you understand like what the trajectory of this company is, what the balance sheet is, who the investors are. We have some, just Google us. We have some high profile investors like Ryan.
I love how you have a lot of actors.
Yeah.
I found it's really interesting, right?
Because they care about their security.
Oh, I bet.
And at the end of the day, I mean, I'm biased. Like, we are a Canadian-based company. We are in 5 countries, but we love our Canadian roots. So very important.
Sir, as we wrap up, is there any like kind of question or thing that people often just don't know, or something that I should have asked you?
That's interesting. No one's ever really asked me that. Yeah, like I was actually, just before this call, my team was taking me through our new leadership development program for our managers. And we were talking about leadership brand. And I was saying, you should ask this question in a different way. And it was like, the question was, what do you want people to know you as? And I said, I like this question, but I think you should do this. I think you should say, project yourself at the end of your career. What do you want people to say about you? That's what's important. And so if you ask me that question, I would just like to be able to say that what I would like people to know about me is that it's like time for me to give back, to help companies, help entrepreneurs, and help this company, make it to its next great destination, and also along the way develop some great talent and support. And I think, it's nice to be having had all that experience and kind of at this point doing this, which is fun and impactful, but it builds on everything else. So yeah, if you have to say like, what do you want people to know about you? I'm like, I just want people to be able to say, oh, I came across Katya and she really helped me with this issue. And I think that's kind of a good way to put a brand.
No, I really appreciate that insight, right? Especially into kind of all the facets of HR and kind of the different ways that you can get into that career, because I think people are just so mistaken about that role just generally, right? Where it's really about how to like build and how to like mentor teams, companies, organizations, because industries even. I've seen some of the most impactful executives that are changing entire industries come from the HR people background. So I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your wealth of knowledge with us.
Well, I really appreciate you both Rick and Jack for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, thank you.